Oh my God, thank you so much for coming. Welcome everyone. I'm actually gonna pull this up right now on the page so that way I can make sure that your payment links is first and foremost, because we want some people to drop some change for RaceBaitr magazine, because y'all are doing Audre Lorde's work here. I want to say thank y'all for visiting us on another episode of The Full Set. I am with my esteemed colleague, Hari Ziyad, and I just want to say welcome, welcome, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I had a
Tell me
long.
the lies and then tell me the truth.
The lie is that, I mean, there's no lie and no truth. I mean, that's like a binary that I don't want to get into today. Like, it was a
Okay.
little bit of bad and a little bit of good. It was a lot busier than I thought, but I'm feeling good. Like, I've had a really amazing weekend. Me and my partner did shrooms on.
What? Okay. We about to have a lituation on this interview today.
We should talk about it. I had so many realizations, and I just feel like I feel.
You look calm. I'm not saying that you don't look calm any other time I see you, but you look calm.
Thank you. Yeah, and usually I'm like really anxious about stuff like this, so and I feel a lot. I feel calm. So yeah,
Everything was meant to happen.
but it was a busy day, and I'm tired. So a little bit of both.
Okay. Thank you for letting me know, because I don't know if you know this, but we in the midst of a pandemic. And I know you're still working. So, has work shifted for you in a different way? Like, I know that you're a writer and you actually are a couple of things. I saw that, well, we don't get into what I saw about you on the internet. You're like, but I did see that, when you and I spoke, you said you were still working. How has work versus pandemic shifted for you?
I mean, yeah, like you said, I do a lot of things. So some of my work stuff has changed in different ways than others. I'm a content strategist at a nonprofit called Breakthrough, and most of that work is digital, and so we've had to shift a lot of our programming to digital, and so I've gotten much busier since. My work at Breakthrough, we've kind of taken a different track. Once this all started, we I just recognized, especially because of talking with the other editors, like we're all really stressed, and so
Right.
I want to just take a step back. And so we've decreased our publishing to like half, and we offered COVID relief grants to writers who would otherwise be submitting. I don't.
Well, I'm nosy. Don't mind me.
And so we've instead of paying like to do more work, we've just been paying people who need it, and it's not that much. Like RaceBaitr doesn't make that much money anyway, but so that's kind of how we've shifted there. And then just overall, I mean, there's a lot going on. I was getting married this year. We've had to postpone that. My mother had just
Definitely
started
understand that
chemo.
sentiment.
So
Your mother did what?
had just started chemo before this all started.
Uh-uh.
Yeah, it was a lot of stressors, and that's why this weekend was so good. Like I needed a perspective shift, and I've been like meditating more, like trying to do that. I needed to just like see this in a different way because I can't change half of those things, but what I can do is change how I interact with them. So yeah, the pandemic has been really intense. There have been days when I'm like, I don't know if tomorrow's I'm gonna be okay. But I think I'm managing, especially with the work that I have control over.
Thank you for explaining that to me. I just have a feel like a very natural question. So you just said that you were going through chemotherapy, and for me, I want to know.
My mother.
That's what I thought you said. I was like, did this say him or his mom? And so, this is a theme that we've been talking about inadvertently, but I kind of want to keep pushing it to the forefront when we talk about Blackness and Black people and how they show up in healthcare. And was your mom able to receive like the treatment that she needed?
Oh, yeah, there's lots of stories.
Oh,
I don't know if she wants all her business out there, so I won't say
okay,
too much. But
that's valid.
one of the like really, I think, just illuminating things that we all know is that they don't care about us. And there was like some metastasizing of her cancer that had happened a long time ago. And we did the tests and they knew about it. But we didn't find out until much later. And there's like no explanation for that. So it hasn't necessarily been that like COVID has affected the care, but this is, I think, to your point, this is just the way that Black people have been operating in the healthcare system forever. And I can only imagine for other folks like who are going through treatment, how many of things get lost to the wayside and ignored or
Right.
disregarded. Because it was a very big thing. Like we needed to start targeted treatment in this area, and we just didn't because they didn't tell us. So yeah, it was really stressful. But since COVID has started, things haven't, nothing has like, that's been directly related to the pandemic has affected her
Okay.
in that way. Obviously, we're really concerned and like trying to make sure that she's not out more or being exposed to things because that's an underlying health condition.
Right. And also like your immune system. So, I mean, thank you for sharing that with us. I worry too about this narrative that keeps getting pushed. And that's the only reason why I've been doing these conversations every day. Because I'm like, nah, we gotta push ourselves here, right? Because everyone else is trying to obscure us. And with that said, I want to talk to you about RaceBaitr magazine. What prompted you to be like, let's launch? Was it what I just said, that there's like this obscurity that Black folks are expected to be in, right? Like this pocket. Like we see y'all, we're human, and also, right, the Blackness can't exist along with your humanity.
Right. Yeah.
Was that even a
So
question? I don't know.
I feel like I have something to respond to. I don't know if it's the question, but yeah, the what prompted me to start RaceBaitr was I was writing and like I went to film school. I wanted to be in TV. I still do. I still do some work in TV, but I was realizing that like the kinds of stories that I wanted to tell, there wasn't really a home for that, at least in the trajectory that I was in right after college. And so I just started this blog. At first, RaceBaitr was just a blog for myself. And I named it that because I realized like if I were going to have the conversations that I wanted to have, honest conversations about Blackness, there were going to be things that, there are going to be accusations and charges lobbed in my direction. And like I'd be called a race baiter, you'd be
Right.
given the race card, blah,
I was
blah.
gonna say, what did they say when you named it such?
And you could either like spend all your time defending against that and trying to like convince people that that's not the case,
Right.
or you can move past that conversation entirely. And that's what I wanted to do. I'm not here to argue with white supremacists who are saying that I'm playing the race card. Like that's not the audience that I'm speaking to. And so I wanted to name the project something that acknowledged that and pushed us forward in that way. And what's been really weird and like fascinating, and I wanted this to happen, but I didn't really expect it, is like white people come across the website and think it's a joke. And so like we avoid so many conversations and controversies. Not
Right.
all of them, like
I was like, y'all comment section be clean as fuck, don't it?
because they don't know, and that's perfectly fine for me. Like I'm not. Those are not the people that. So it kind of worked twofold. Like it was a reminder for myself and for the writers who are um, featured on the site, but it's also a mark for everyone who's coming to the page. Like this is the types of conversation that I'm interested in having. Hopefully, we can move beyond just arguing and being defensive to white folks in this space.
And y'all employ all Black writers. Some of them I am fanfare favorites of. You have Heslov, who's a consistent writer. I want to talk about how y'all aren't, for the title To Be RaceBaitr, y'all talk about everything that affects us. There's like religion pieces, there's pieces on healthcare, there's pieces on queerness, right? And you had written a piece about, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was some time ago. Obama gave a fucking speech, and then like Terry Crews, all of these respectable Winston Luke black men came, and they were like, yes, because it's toxic masculinity, not masculinity. Like, and you were like, it's a trope. You were like, there's no difference,
Right.
And so, can you delve into that topic a little bit? I know that you are a Black man and you are queer, and I want to know, I guess, hear your first person experience on what that means, right? To just you. You don't have to speak for everyone else, right? Which I know is difficult sometimes, but I just want to know from your perspective, like, why do you think that people believe there is a difference between masculinity and toxic masculinity?
Yeah, so I think there are lots of reasons why people believe that. But the reason that I reject that conversation, I also don't identify as men. It's all the same reasons. And I think you mentioned earlier that.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Oh, no worries.
No, that's important, because if we don't have the conversation, then it's just like this thing, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's part of this conversation, so it's a perfect time to bring it up. Is that the ways that whiteness genders things was never meant for us. There's no like good version of a colonist idea of masculinity. There's no differentiation between toxic and regular masculinity, because it's all wrapped in colonial ideas of gender that we would never have access to, and we would never be able to do, and it can never be done well in a freeing way for us, even if we did have access to it, because we know that.
Did you say one time that gender actually is Black?
I said.
That's what I thought you said. Like, wait a minute. So, okay, all right.
I wrote a piece called My Gender is Black, using the work of a lot of other theorists who've done work around Blackness and gender, specifically Horton Spillers. But so it's not a new concept that we don't have access to gender the way that white folks do, and that gender is not good for us. And so I think we spend a lot of time trying to like fit into definitions of gender that, one, we will never be able to fit into completely, but also that harm us as we do all this work to try and fit into them. So, and that goes, I think that speaks to why I don't identify as a man, is because the way that manhood is understood in this conversation, at least, I think there's probably a language where I could exist as a man, but in this context, with manhood comes whiteness, comes patriarchy, comes an existence that I have never experienced, and that's always been harmful for me.
Thank you for saying that, because I would have never known, this is also a conceptualization of me also like deepening my queer analysis, because queer is politic, right? Like, it's not enough to be gay and also be Black. You really have to do your research. And so I wonder about that, because you'd also written this other piece. I try to read all y'all stuff, and also it's very heady for me at times because y'all are really smart, so it was something about I'm gay, but I wasn't born this way. And I wanted you to talk more about that, because I don't want to say it wrong, so.
It was, I think the piece was called Queerness, My Queerness is a Choice, or something. Choosing Queerness.
Okay. I was like, okay. So when we talk about choosing queerness, right? Like, what does that mean? Because a lot of people, there's this argument, oh, that's just the way that you were born, right? And so what, for you, like, how do you define queerness?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it, like, queerness.
Oh, thank you. Everybody tells me I be saying my own shit.
It's a politic, right? I write about this a lot in the book, because it's so important to me. Like, yeah, like sexuality is real, and like, yeah, I like men sometimes, but also like falling in love with folks who transition later and might have realized that they've never identified as a man. So what does that mean?
Mm,
And I think asking yourself those questions is what queerness really is. Like when I think about who I was as a child, like if I were to say I've always been queer, that child was someone who could ask themselves, why do I feel limited on who I can love? And that was
mm,
what queerness was. It wasn't the actual actor, like who the love was with. It was that despite the limitations, um, I was willing to move beyond that or to imagine something different. And so I think that choice of like, even though the world puts all these limitations in front of who you're supposed to love, like that's what queerness is. And so I think I find that in my non-sexual relationships, sometimes even more than in my sexual ones. Like my friendships are queer because we talk about shit that we this world doesn't say like friends should be doing this. As the world
right.
also says like friends shouldn't touch it a certain way. Like I cuddle with my friends sometimes. And
Right.
what does that mean? And that's changing how I exist in the world, and rejecting these like these boundaries and the binaries of around how we're supposed to behave. And that's what queerness is. And that's why I said like for me, like what I'm trying to do with my love in any expression of it is make that choice. And it's not something that's going to just come. I have to put in some work to do that. And I think it's our responsibility, all of our responsibility, to put in that work.
Thank you for that. Ooh, child, a word. So I think about just like something you said about cuddling with friends, and something that's actually been coming up for me a lot in these conversations lately. I think I interviewed Lutzi Segu, and I was like, y'all are just so fucking romantic. Like I feel such a freedom. And I mean romantic even in my friendships. Like there's like this place, right, that we're boxed into, that you can't be, or you can't experience a romance with your friends. It doesn't mean that I want to, I mean, I don't know, maybe it does, but I don't think that it means that. I feel like I send my friends flowers, or I'm like, bitch, you need a vibrator, like, you know, and I've mailed it, like, you know what I'm saying? Like I think it's okay. And I don't, I always feel like the weird one out, but having these conversations have given me a space to be like, I can show up this way, and who gonna check me, boo? Like, you know, so I really just appreciate you explaining it. I mean, I have my thoughts and analysis, but it's really important, like you just said, like your friendships are queer because it allows you to have conversations that you probably couldn't have with other people. And so I appreciate you bringing or shedding light onto your own thoughts around that.
Yeah.
You're so beautiful.
Thank
No,
you.
you are. Like
Yeah.
I knew you was beautiful from the photos, but I mean it's still a photo. But I'm like, oh, I see the dimensions. Okay, all right. I want to ask you about your book. So you when you were like, you know, you had said something that you wish you just write more. Like that's all you've lived to do is write, right? And so when you wrote this, like what did you want? And it's a coming of age, right? What did you want? Did you want to tell a story for everyone else to read and like to identify with, or did you just want to write this to put it out into the ethos?
Yeah, so actually the original subtitle was a never coming of age.
I keep mentioning the subtitle.
No, no, but that's good because I think the reason that it was a never coming of age is because I think so often it can be um, two things. I think the coming of age story is like something that we can all identify with. Like you're something before and then you grow out of it and now you're an adult, blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to like reorient our gaze to like to finding your childhood again as an adult. So it's kind of like the reverse of that. But also this idea that like there is a single coming of age story for everybody.
Right.
Which to your point, you're asking like, is this something that I wanted everybody to identify with? Yes, obviously I want everybody to read it, everybody buy it, and like to
I'm about
resonate
to
with
buy
them.
it right now after this.
Well, yeah, it should have the pre-order link soon, but it's not yet. I'll let you
Oh,
know.
not yet. Okay, we're gonna share it because this is we're gonna port the Facebook Live over to the podcast. So once you get it, I will put it in the description. So
Sounds good. But yeah, so I was writing it really for me, and this is like it comes up a lot in my edits. Like this isn't just
for
for
an
you,
audience, that's what
and
editors say. They tell you about your audience, and you're like, no, this is for
yeah,
me.
it's for me. I mean, it has to be both. Again, I think that we can do things at a different on two different levels, but
Right.
ultimately, it was about the exploration that I was going through. And I think those are the best stories and the most, I always think about Moonlight when I'm thinking about like audience and like needing to speak to a wider audience. And Moonlight was so specific as a film.
Right.
It was so Black, it was so queer, and it obviously resonated enough to get an Oscar, which I don't think that's a good or a bad thing. But what I
Right.
do is that when you tell a story that's so specific and so real without watering it down, it's necessarily going to draw other people in because our personal lives are political. Like the way we move through the world affects other folks always. And so if we can be honest about it, um, there will always be a way that people can find an end. So I wrote it with that understanding of like, I just want to be as clear and honest as possible about what I'm going through and what I'm learning. And I want to welcome people into it, but it's not for y'all.
Right.
It's with y'all, but it's not for you. And
It's y'all adjacent.
yeah. And so that's what all of my writing I think really is I learned through my writing. I healed through my writing. Writing is my first therapy. Writing was my second religion. I learned myself through it, and I couldn't do therapy and I couldn't have spirituality without the writing part. Maybe if
Glad
it
you
was in a
said
different
it.
form, but the story. What'd you say?
I said, I'm so glad you said it because we're going to get into spirituality. I was like, because we didn't practice, right? We didn't talk about our talking points, but I was going to ask you, Black queer, like, what is your spirituality? But, oh, you drinking wine? Damn. I was like, I never know if it's going to be a dry night in the Delgado podcast.
You should get you some.
I'll wait. I got my little half water, half lemonade business.
But yeah, spirituality. So I grew up Hindu, Hare Krishna.
You sound so Southern, so those two things to me just didn't go together. But I'm learning.
Well, yeah, my
Where are
family's
you from
Southern.
originally?
I'm from Cleveland.
You and L. Y'all are
Southern.
bumpkins.
Most what you'll I don't know how often you go to the Midwest, but most of us like we're a couple generations from the Great Migration. Like we
Okay.
have very Southern accents. It mixes with things, so it slightly sounds different, but you can still generally tell. My grandmother's from Alabama. They moved to Cleveland when she was a teenager. But yeah, my grandmother and my mother both converted to Hinduism when my mother was about 20. And my mother had me when she was 40. So she was practicing for like 20 years.
Wow.
She's like a minister in the religion.
Okay.
And so I grew up like I was homeschooled. Like I grew up going to the communes and like my dad's Muslim too.
Oh, wow.
And so, but I mostly spent life in like temples and growing up Hindu, which really informs a lot. And when you all read the book, you'll see. But it mostly just informed this idea that like what white folks um, say is real or like the way that you're supposed to live your life doesn't have to be. Like my parents were the biggest nonconformists. And that wasn't always a good thing, but what it did was show me that I could be a nonconformist too. And that's what one of the main things I took from that whole religious experience. But there is a lot of lot of that coming back now as I'm exploring my spirituality. I spoke with a friend, Maisha. Do you know Maisha?
Worthington?
Yeah. When she came to New York, we spoke a little bit, and she advised me to like to create an altar to my grandmother, because I was talking to her about how that was like really important to me. And so I've been doing a lot of ancestor communication recently, and like trying to bridge that gap between like me rejecting spirituality completely with like rediscovering like African traditional religions, with also like gaining a new appreciation for how I grew up, which all of those things are tied up with each other, because my grandmother was very Hindu. So talking to her was going to bring a lot of the Hinduism back. But there's also a lot of like overlap. Like I grew up with altars all over my house, so I already knew how to set one up. I already knew how to do offerings, and so it was just like bringing all of those things back, but now to my grandmother instead of to deities. Uh, and that's pretty much where I am now. Is like trying to like, because I learned a lot from the Hinduism in terms of the rejection of this physical world and the possibilities of other worlds. But now I'm trying to like merge that with my Blackness, and like, because whatever spirituality I discover now is going to be centered around that. And it always comes back to ancestors for me.
I'm trying not to cry, but I'm crying because I just feel like they want us to know them so bad, and it just seems like lately in my life, like if I try to run from my heritage or not engage in a spiritual practice, even though that's my calling, it just seems like I keep talking to people that are like, this is my path, like, and so as soon as you said that you had started setting up your altar, I just get emotional about things like that, because I just feel like we are connecting to our birthright in so many ways. And that is essentially our Blackness. That is like, Egypt says goodbye to the warriors by my door. When we leave out the house, bye warriors. Kisses a legua. Like, I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, we have to teach the next generation,
right,
and have these conversations, so that way we remember, because we've been so far removed from what we belong to. So I'm just grateful that we was able to talk about spirituality in ways that both of us could meet each other at, because I grew up Pentecostal. My mother was a serious Bible thumper, like, and it's just very interesting because she used to always say, how'd you know that? Like, I just have these, I'm like, I don't know, I heard it in my ear, like, and I didn't know that it was messages from our ancestors, and I just always had that gift. So I appreciate you sharing about your grandma, because woo, I have all the feelings. Thank you. Sorry, I just needed to take a moment for that.
No, yeah,
I just think it's a beautiful thing. Like, I'm so happy to hear you say this.
Yeah, it's been so, and it ties into my abolitionist politic, right? Because I wasn't really close to my grandmother growing up. She had bipolar disorder, and she was untreated for a long time, and like had tons of crises. Like I remember some scary shit with my grandmother. And it wasn't until college, I would go home for break during college, and we had moved her into our house because she like needed more care, and like she was getting treatment, and she was like this completely different person. And it was like, for the first time, like I like had my grandmother, and it was like this woman was there the whole time, and like I almost like disregarded that because of all this trauma that she went through, that like affected her and was putting her through so much pain. Like I almost added another layer of that by like disregarding her, and like realizing that all of that was underneath, and like there was more to my grandmother to learn. And then she died like not too much longer after that. And so like, of course I needed to continue those conversations, and like,
Right.
and of course I could still learn more about her, because if I could learn more about her after 17 years of like what we went through, like what is death? You know, like I can
Right.
still have a connection with my grandmother and learn her. Like death is, that's not nearly as big as what we went
Right.
through. So and then realizing like what that meant for how I interact with other people that I might write off before, like seeing the traumas that they've gone through, like that. My grandmother is why I'm an abolitionist. And
So can you explain, I'm being funny, but I'm being serious. Can you explain what abolitionist means? Because I know there's a lot of us who say that we're abolitionists and we want to bail out Black mamas, but then as soon as someone else do something else, they're like, no, put them niggas in jail though. Like, you know, Craig was on the block. He was
they're all
pumping that nigga in jail.
Yeah, abolition means a lot of things, but ultimately it means that punitive carceral measures, which is the root of prisons, is not healing. Those two things are conflated in this society, but they're completely mutually exclusive. Um, and so obviously on one level that means like, let's organize and get rid of prisons and bail people out of jail, and like
Right.
talk about how fucked up police are, and like make sure that people know that those are not solutions. But it also means how we live our lives. Like I said with my grandmother, like, me writing her off was me punishing her for being sick
Right.
and for hurting me because she was sick. Which isn't to say like I didn't have legitimate hurt from that, or like I shouldn't have felt a type of way because of that. But the punishment aspect of it wasn't going to do anything to heal that. And so when I started to interact with her, when we started going on those walks before she passed away, it wasn't me like forgiving her for everything. I don't think abolition is about forgiveness at all. It was about seeing who she was and seeing myself reflected in that, and seeing all of the shit that I did, that I was doing a lot of fucked up shit that could have caused just as much harm. And what would I do to make sure that I wasn't spreading that, you know, to other people? So abolition at its root is self-reflective. It's about not pointing fingers at individuals to solve problems that are systematic, and it's about making sure that we understand what the systematic is. And again, I think those things are very different from forgiveness. Like an individual might not be responsible for every harm that they've caused you ultimately, but they should be accountable to their part in it too. And so we
Right.
can have accountability at the same time, but punishment is not accountability. So that's what abolition is to me.
So I'm struggling with something, and maybe you could help me. So I started to write down the question, but I want to go like tangents. So that's where I'm at. When I'm going to have Ejaris Dixon join us on the show at some point, and she talks a lot about transformative justice. I've been noticing an uptick in, I think, what is super important work, right? I think that people having circle processes, there are organizations like No Mas that talk about intimate partner violence, and what does that look like in the age of abolition, right? And if we're all supposed to be woke as fuck, why are we pushing for abusers? You know, because there's different level of abuse, right? I mean, if we're just gonna talk about the real fucking thing, there's things that someone has done wrong and are abusive, and then there are the people who abuse consistently, right? And sometimes those can overlap and conflate, right? And so, but I'm noticing that the restorative justice processes that a lot of us have engaged in or know about, like even me, like I have looked at a process I've done about 17 of them so far. Like, and the worst one is when I stopped doing it. It was a person who was accused of rape. And I was just like, I didn't realize that I had drawn a boundary. And I think that there was one of your articles, you kind of spoke on this. Like, for me, I drew a boundary because of like what you said about traumas and like not knowing where it shows up in that person. My wound couldn't meet that person's wound. And like, I'm really good about compartmentalizing because of my shit, like, and I couldn't do it. And so I guess the tangent was important for me to actually pose the question. What does when we talk about Afrofuturism, what does accountability look like when we've been taught to incarcerate folks as a way of accountability? And if we're trying to move away from that, does accountability look like penance? I don't know. I personally don't know. I thought I'd have the answers, but I'm finding more and more that I don't, because even what we do as communities sometimes is we punish the person. The person has to be excluded from community, and then there's no timeline. Years can pass before the person can come back. Or if they do come back, it's with the jail record, essentially. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I just have thoughts, and I would love to know what you're thinking. You seem like you're itching in the elbow.
I definitely don't have all of the answers either, but I think that's why, like, it's so important, the self-reflection part of abolition, because you will only really know what's punitive when you know yourself. And so my book is more so about, like, trying to figure out myself, because I don't always know, like, is this response just me creating a healthy distance from someone who's harmful for me, or not? But when you haven't done that internal work, you'll never have the answer to that. So I think it's an individual situation, which isn't a fun answer. Like, we like to have clean cut situations.
What's the instructions?
I think there are some situations where getting someone out of the community is not punitive, where even someone dying is not punitive.
Right.
I don't think that abolition means that we can never fight and kill people.
Right.
We're in a war, which that we are. But I think that in order to know what the difference is, we have to know ourselves. And so we have to be able to ask ourselves honestly that question, like, am I doing this just to punish this person? Or am I really looking for my own healing and their own healing? And I don't think we always ask those questions. But when we do,
I would agree with you. I don't think many of us are interrogating. And even myself, I feel like I'm a choosy lover when it comes to accountability. I'm like, not towards my friend, but maybe towards this other person. You must be sacrificed, you know?
Right. And I think it's so important to ask ourselves that question. And it will look different when we answer it, because for some people, healing will look a lot harder and harsher than it will for other people. I don't think everybody's relationship with their harm doer should be my relationship with my grandmother. I just think that's one example of a relationship with someone who's done you harm that resulted in healing. And it only resulted in healing because we asked ourselves those questions, and I'm still asking her those questions now as she's in the afterlife. So it's a constant questioning process, and you have to be okay with questions.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm gonna sit with that. I'm just gonna ask myself more questions. Questions I'll be asking myself is, how long does it take when you date someone else's partner? Like, how long does it take to get over that shit? And if I did something wrong to you by dating your partner or whatever, right? Like, everybody want to say hoe is life until some hoe ass shit happens, right? if I'm dating your partner, or a person who was previously your partner, and then that hurts you, why the fuck is the narrative like there's a question. Is the question how we hold people accountable without the eternal shroud of their aggression or transgression over them? And so, like, I have one of those shrouds. Like, a lot of people don't like me. This one narrative from this one person about how I hurt her. Like, and I'm an abuser because I dated a person. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so it's just, for me, it's like, I don't, sort of back what you said about naming the magazine RaceBaitr. You're like, then that's not my audience. I can acknowledge, hey, I definitely probably hurt her feelings when I engage in this sort of behavior. And your opinion of me, because I did that 4 years ago, doesn't define me as a person, right? And there's like growth, and then there's reasons why that happened. You know, it's just all of these things. But that's why I said I see it not just with myself, I see it happening more and more and more. If you are the person who's caught in the woke book argument between two people, I think I guess I didn't know how to name it. I think I've been interrogating, like, do I need to even get involved in this? Do I need to say something right now? Is this the proper forum that I could listen to this person's pain about the situation and then listen to that person? Is it even necessary? Am I being prima donna from Love and Hip Hop Miami right now? Am I just inserting myself into some shit that does not concern me? Like, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's not. I think it's not always useful to be in those conversations online. Like that's. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed. I'm taking a huge step back.
You're so nice now.
I don't know. I did like basically a 180, but it was because. It was because of these, like, it's not that I don't have thoughts about things, but it was like, what is the end result of this? Like, is this going to be beneficial ultimately?
Right.
Or what? Am I venting? Like, I was doing a lot of punitive things just in that, like cussing people out. Like, I just wanted them to feel bad about saying stupid shit. Which
you did that to me once, but I don't think it was on purpose. It wasn't even anything that serious. I think it was like someone's article. It might have been Damon's. I'm not sure. You know, you and I have known each other since like the end of 2016 digitally. But it was a question about either the title of an article or what substance was in the article, and I had shared my thoughts. And a lot of Black men and like male presenting folks came on the post and was like, and this is what I think. And I was like, I thought Harry was gonna be on my side. I just want niggas to be on my side, you know? And you were like, well, actually, but I didn't take it offensively because you didn't, I mean, even if you would have came for me, it was just a conversation that needed to be had. Because sometimes once you print something, the nuance is sort of, it's on now everyone else to discuss it if we're going to engage with it. If we're going to be Black lit reviewers on people's blogs.
Right. And I really, because there are people who like have, and I think that's what accountability feels like. Like it might be uncomfortable, like you might disagree with me. I might have wanted you to be like on my side, but we're still able to like work through that.
Right. And I don't have to destroy you on the internet and you not writing a RaceBaitr article about that damn DiDi. It doesn't sometimes need to go into the ether like that.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was a disagreement. Like, and I guess that was my question to you. I had written down a question and I was like, so what does that mean if you're saying, you talked about your grandma having, you said bipolar disorder? Mm-hmm. And so, you know, when we meet people at their wounds, but then they have shit like, you know, I have BPD, but it's borderline personality disorder. And I think about someone else that I might be in relationship with and I've hurt them and they also have some sort of serious mental health issue. Like, what does that look like when we can, like, what does healing look like to care for one another amidst hurt feelings? Can we separate and then be like, can we come back to this? You know what I'm saying? Like, why does it have to be like fucking Mortal Kombat? You know, I got the scorpion fucking like.
Well, that's what I think, and I'm so glad we talked about spirituality. I mean, all of this is connected, but I think it's such a spiritual practice because I had to realize that all of the healing work that I'm going to do with my grandmother was not going to happen in this lifetime. There was something, and it wasn't just her bipolar disorder. Like, I'm not blaming that on her disability, but there are some things that just we won't necessarily overcome right now. But in believing in something else that comes after that, which I wholeheartedly do, I was able to still maintain that relationship and still be able to work on that. And then so even our living relationship had to shift because of that. And I think that that's really crucial because we want people to change immediately. We want them to change now. And we want to see the results.
We want drive-through accountability.
Yeah. And sometimes it doesn't even happen in this lifetime. What to speak of tomorrow? So yeah, it's really a spiritual thing to me, like long term. What does this mean beyond our existence in this conversation right now? What do my words mean? How do they resonate? And that's not just like this like mythical idea of the afterlife, but it's also like, how does it resonate in how I'm interacting with her in front of my little brother? Like that's also part of the afterlife of her, is his memories of me interacting with my grandmother. And like, so what does that mean? And she lives in our relationship because he's seen me interact with her. So it has to go beyond like the immediacy that I think is very capitalistic, and I definitely think is a white supremacist way of thinking about other people. Like people exist in the space that you see them, and they don't exist outside.
I have to go back and watch this because you just said a word, and I don't what marker was it? 45. Okay, so like I'm actually gonna type that as a comment. 45 minutes and 17 seconds. Thank you. I want to talk about Afropessimism. What is it, right? And like, why does it belong in the same sentence of Afrofuturism? I have to go back and watch this because you just said a word, and I don't what marker was it? Is that me or you?
I didn't mean to like click on that.
Niggas don't know how to not touch nothing.
I was like, why are you repeating yourself? Yeah, I was trying to, because my computer was slowing down. I was trying to close some windows. Anyways, I'm not an Afropessimist scholar, or like, I'm not, people ask me about this a lot because they probably see me talk about it or post it. But, and I've definitely learned a lot from Frank Wilderson's, Idea Hartman, and lots of other folks who are either call themselves Afropessimists or are perceived to be. But it really is, from my understanding, rooted in the idea from Fanon that the human as constructed has no place for us, for Black folks in particular. And so there's no hope for us within human constructs. There's no hope for us within a human future. There's no hope for us within human stories. There's only outside of that, which is often reduced to there's no hope for us at all. But there's part of that, which is we don't have to exist within this construct. That's often forgotten, which is an Afrofuturist modality. Like what exists outside of the way that this world is described right now? What exists outside of the way that we describe ourselves as human right now? And so that's why I think there's a lot of overlap there. There's
when I hear about Afropessimism, I think about, and this is probably my ignorance, or not, I don't even want to call it ignorance, sometimes just the not knowing. I can't be knowing everything. Feminista Jones was like, I don't want to talk to you if you don't know what OPEC is. And I was like, damn, goes to Google OPEC. I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, but she was like, no, it's all up, boo. But when I hear the word Afropessimism, Harry, I feel like it's centering whiteness, and like in this weird way. I know it's such like this thing that's researched, but for me, just hearing something attached, like another negative word attached to Afro anything, is just, it bothers me so bad. I don't know why. And I can't get out of my feelings on it. So that's why I was like, I would love to talk to you about this, because what does they mean, you know?
That makes sense though, but I think the counter argument is like, negative to whom? And who decided that pessimism is negative? And why are we...
Fuck!
So yeah,
you wrote an article about sadness, like can only be fear, I mean joy or rage, and like how sadness doesn't get fucking airtime. So, oh my God.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it. I do think that there are legitimate critiques, and I think that's part of it, is that um, even it's still saying that within this world, and the fact that it's not always clear that you're only limiting this giving up, I don't know what the noun of that is, to this world, and you're not saying always this world, that you're centering the world that you're critiquing. But I don't know if that's always true. I think if you actually read a lot of Afropessimism, it's clear what the limitations are and what the pessimism refers to. And it's not just an overwhelming, always pessimistic outlook. It's a pessimism within this frame. There's no
So
hope.
should I take away from this conversation to not align Afropessimism with Hoteps?
Oh yeah, no, those are very different. I mean, there's
just wanted to be certain.
No, yeah, I think the biggest contributors to that framework that I know are Black feminists. There's Hartman and Christina Sharp and Horton Spillers, who did all of that research, did all of that scholarship around gender, is very fundamental to all of the other theory that's built around it. And so I definitely don't think that it's inherently Hotepi or doesn't have room for a gender analysis. What it does is say that the gender analysis that we have using this lens within white supremacy is going to be incomplete. And so we need to have a different gendered analysis. If we're going to say that we're gendered people, if we're going to say that I'm a man and you're a woman or whatever, then we have to be able to say outside of whiteness, that's who we are, because that's how we want to be able to claim ourselves, is outside of whiteness. So yeah.
I wrote down Christina's name because I'm going to look her up.
What'd you say?
I said I wrote down Christina's name because I'm gonna look that up, because I feel like also there's like this desire, not this desire. Well, yeah, I'll say desire because I fuck with the word desire heavily, right? There's this desire sometimes by Black folks who have more teeth in knowledge, right? There was an article, it wasn't written by you, and I'm trying to remember who the person was. It was about like the cost of education, like that they had blood on their hands. Do you remember that article?
Maybe it was Amber.
It wasn't Amber. It was a male presenting name. Is what I was like, maybe Adam or something like that, or Anthony or whatever. And I would have to like look it up, but it was about, you know, I feel like a lot of times I don't engage in conversations with my peers because I feel like inadequate. I feel like, you know, and I just had this conversation with Toya about being kind, right? And so Toya Smith about being kind. I was like, well, I remember the first time I came up in here, y'all think it wasn't kind to me, except for Toya. But and there's like this sense of, well, we know better than you, you know, and you know, I find myself then repeating, right, that same pattern when the notification comes on, hey, we got some new members, and I'm like, let there be blood. But, you know, because I remember that the way that I was initiated, like, you know, and I think about not academia so much, but so much so, I don't know, I guess I'll say Black academics, because you don't have to be in academia to be a Black academic, right? And I think about even myself, like, you know, I'm 19 credits away from a bachelor's degree. And then because I feel robbed of my knowledge base, like I'm going directly into a dual master's, right? And I don't want to do that shit. I'm only doing it so that way I can actually sit on these panels and feel comfortable with people, because it seems like it can't be, it's not just the analysis, it's like the letters behind one's name. It's what those letters get you into, and the spaces and the platform it lends you, right? And so my question is like, how can we have conversations about really fucking important topics, right? And in a way that's not, I don't even want to say sensationalist, but a lot of times when I talk to folks with a higher degree specialty than I do, I feel very like abandon. And, you know, like, I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, no, it definitely, and that's part of one of the
I
reasons.
can't believe I said I feel abandoned, but that's probably what I meant.
And I think, I mean, that makes sense. I think that's part of one of the reasons why I don't identify as a Afro-pessimist outside of, there are lots of reasons, but one of the main ones is I think that that framework as a, like a theory with a body of work that's inside of it are like all reflections of how I grew up. Like niggas in my community were already giving up on this shit. Like that's what a lot of the things that we pathologized them for was because they gave up on this shit. And so to have to only be able to talk about that in these terms is very kind of violent in and of itself. And I say this knowing that like people who are identified as Afro-pessimists recognize this and aren't trying to say that they're the only ones who theorize about this. But that's how a lot of conversations in academia manifest. And it has to, because in order to like be a successful academic, you have to coin new terms, you have to say new things, and like you have to create a new lane basically. And we know that that's like none of this is new, like all of this is ancestral, and so I think it makes perfect sense to reject that. And I think if you're an academic who can't emphasize the ancestral parts of your work, then I don't really want to have anything to do with you. And so, yeah, I don't think that this conversation necessarily has to be inaccessible. Like I said, I think the ones who live this life the most, they're not calling this Afropessimism.
Right.
Queer
I think about somebody like Sukiana. Like I see her as a Black feminist, but if I get into if I do another panel at Harvard and someone says, well, that's not, you know, how come you're not quoting Audre Lorde, or how come you're not quoting Alice Walker or Michelle Wallace? Like, I'm like, I haven't had time to read those books. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and like, you know, it's interesting. You went to film school, right? And like, are you working on, I know you had worked on an episode of something.
I was a consultant on a TV show.
Okay. Are you going to produce a film? Are you going to Ava DuVernay us?
I want to, my goal, my dream is to create a television show. Like I'm more into TV than film, but I'd love to do a film too. I actually have some ideas for adapting the book into a film.
Okay. Who's going to play you?
I don't know. I haven't gotten that far yet. I haven't got that. Maybe India Moore. I don't know. But no, I think that yeah, I'm still rooted in film. Like I'm a visual person. I went into journalism, like I said, because I felt really constrained and like what I really wanted to do was impossible. And now that those doors are opening back up to me, it's really exciting and scary and fascinating. I had just gotten script writing representation before Corona hit, and we were talking about, you know, going to LA and shows. But yeah, I want to write Black shit. I want to write. In the show that I worked on, David Makes Man was created by Terrell McCraney, who wrote the Moonlight, the play that Moonlight is based on. And that was such a like, that movie was so life-changing for me, and I want to create work like that. I think there are a lot of limitations for film and for media in this world in general. But I think that film was so subversive for the reasons we talked about earlier. Like it was so specific, but it still was able to resonate enough to like get funding and be successful. But it told us a different story than it told the white people that were watching it. And I hope that my book tells us a different story. And I hope that whatever television that I create tells us a different story too.
I'm really excited about all these manifestations that's happening on the show right now.
Me too.
Can we just talk about the shrooms? I really, I feel like we should end on a very high note. No pun intended. I'm a mom, so that's where that corny ass joke just came from. So the first time I ever tried shrooms, it was by accident. Everybody, like, I felt like, not peer pressure, like I won't put that on folks because, you know, they're probably watching or gonna watch it later, but it was like everyone was passing around like cups of something. And they was like, yo, you got that tea? And so like in my head, I was thinking Long Island iced tea or whatever. And actually I'm very ditzy anyway. It's fine, whatever. So I was like, oh, let me get a cup real quick. We was at Soulfire, and it was the summer solstice party, or yeah, it was a summer solstice party. And I took it, I want to say within an hour, my nigga. Like I was on because they have a built-in dance floor like on the farm grounds, right? Like, and I have you ever watched Charlie Brown, the Christmas Story special? And Linus.
I don't remember anything from that.
Okay, so I think it was Linus or the dude with the blonde hair and the black and white striped shirt. It was just doing this dance like over and over. Yo, I could dance, but I was doing that dance, like just a bop and a one step, like, you know, for 4 hours. And there were rainbows and it was amazing. People's hair was just like so beautiful. With? I was with everybody in upstate New York. Like niggas come from all across the country to come to this party. Soulfire has it twice a year. And so I was with friends, but I was just like not talking to anybody and just being like, everyone and everything is so beautiful. Now, the second time I did shrooms, I was like, I can't do drugs anymore because I wanted to stop. I wanted to stop feeling like everything was beautiful and stop doing this little dance that I was doing for 4 hours. But the second time I did shrooms, I was actually with my friend Shia, Buffy, a couple other dope Black femmes, and I felt like the tree had reached down and was like holding my hand and we were talking. Like, I feel like shrooms is, you know, I'm not promoting drugs, kids. What I'm saying is, it's a different experience. And I would only do it with people I trust, number one. Number two, I don't want to be inside of a house or by a highway because I've heard stories, but I want to advocate for the feeling. Like that was probably the first time in a long time I experienced joy, like, you know, just a pure unfiltered joy.
It was, well, yeah, shrooms is, I won't give the disclaimers. I suggest psychedelics to lots of people. I think that you definitely have to your point, be with people that you trust, and you don't do it alone. You have to do it with someone you can be vulnerable with. I've actually never done it out like at an event, so
it was wild. Everything was moving and like
too overwhelming for me.
My face was being touched by the tree.
It would be a lot for me because it's something comforting about being at home, but maybe that's just because I've only ever done it at home. Like we went outside and like I was dancing, but what it did is like it did a lot of things, but one of the things that I think is really important is it shows you that you have the answer to what's going to bring you joy. Like it's like whatever I think is going to bring me joy in this moment is actually going to bring me joy in this moment. So I'm going to do it, and instead of like questioning myself a million fucking times, I'm just going to do it. And that's such a like freeing thing. And then when you extrapolate from that and like take that down to within the context of like other thoughts, like even sad thoughts, like I know my body knows the response to this and it's going to do it, and I should trust it, and it should just take me there. Like I always cry when I do psychedelics, and I cried a lot this weekend, but it was like such a good, like I learned so much while I was crying. Like, wow, like this is why I'm crying. This is how I can affect how I'm feeling in the future. And this is like, I was just like learning things while I was doing it. but you have to like you have to like be willing to let yourself experience that. And I don't think that everybody is there yet. But when you are, like,
I don't think everyone is there yet either.
I just feel like I let my body and my mind just like take me. I trusted myself, and it feels like the first time whenever you do it. It's like I'm trusting myself for the first time to do what's right for me. And I should do this all the time, or as much as I can possibly do without destroying the house.
Right.
Because I woke up the next day, there's clothes everywhere. Because I was just like,
you were like, I need to try on everything.
But yeah, it was such a good experience. And I was like feeling so much anxiety because of COVID and like sadness. I had just got off the phone with my mother when I decided to do it. And like, it was a really touching but sad conversation. And then I was just like, I want to sit in this. Like, I don't want to like try to avoid it. Like, usually I'll smoke weed and like try not to think about what my anxiety is taking me. But it's like shrooms is the opposite. Like, you just dive deeper.
It's a different thing. It's a very different thing because I do edibles and I do the pen. I don't smoke because I got a lot of lips. I just need them the same way that they are. So, and I know that in my family, niggas with my lips don't have my lips no more. So, but yeah, I would agree with you. And when you told me, I was like, oh my God, these are the conversations. I'm like, not saying that everything we haven't spoken about has been equally important, but this conversation is about freedom, right? And I've never felt so untethered to anything as I felt when I've done psychedelics. So, I mean, I feel like vulnerability is a thing that goes along with it, because also when you talk about it, you have to trust the person you're talking about it to, like, you know. And so I appreciated you sharing that with me. That was like really wholesome of you. I don't even know if you're trying to be wholesome today, but you slid right in there. So.
No, yeah, like I said, I'm a proponent. So
So, right when I'm about to end the podcast, I always ask my guest a two-pronged question. The first part is, did I ask you all the things that you thought I was going to ask you? Is there anything you're surprised I didn't bring up? And the second question is, if you were watching the show for the second time, who would you want to be on the show?
I didn't really have any expectations for this. Like, I'd only seen clips of earlier ones because I was in the middle of my edits, so I didn't have a lot of time. And then like I noticed that you didn't like send any questions or anything beforehand, and usually that'll like bring me anxiety, but I was like, I'm gonna just go with it. And like, I'm sure it's gonna be a dope conversation, even though we've never like spoken to each other like this before. And part of that might have been the shrooms. Like, I've been letting myself just go with things this week. And I was just, I didn't have a lot of expectations. I knew we were gonna talk about some Black shit. And I knew
that's my new byline. I hope you know. I might give you credit. I don't know. When they ask me for the 10-word version of what my podcast is, it's just some fucking Black shit. Okay.
I have a lot of people I'd love to see this conversation with. Maisha, who we talked about before. Tim, my partner, who is really great. He's also an editor at RaceBaitr. But I'd love to just see y'all interact and see what comes out of it. Amber, who's also an editor at RaceBaitr. Yeah, I think your list so far is really dope. I'm glad you have been saving these because I'm gonna just be watching.
I'm excited to move them to podcast form. One thing I will say is it's been, you and I talked about this offline. It's just been a little bit of a labor. Like, I'm tired. I still work full time. My kid is back home with me. It's just been very interesting because it's not like I can just, you saw what we went through trying to get the show started. I can't just turn on the live button. It's like a whole process. It's getting your bio. It's making sure I follow up with you, making sure if I didn't follow up with you, then we scramble now and find this time before, just to touch base about what your needs are and what my needs are. And so I've been doing this every night. And I said I was going to stop May 30th. but I'm booked into mid-June. And so there's got to be a point. Like, I feel like these stories and these conversations are super important, but there's got to be a point that I'm like, you know, that we resume life as normal, and I will still do the show. It just won't be every day. Right. But it's important to me that y'all are dope as fuck. Like, everyone that I've had on the show, regardless of whether I get along or not, whatever, it's just dope ass Black folks, like uplifting and elevating their stories or sharing things like, you know, that I would have never known this shit about you. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I think we need to do more of our full selves, but like just with each other, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, just in that bubble, in that vacuum. Yeah. And I was so glad that you said yes. I was like, this nigga said yes to the dress. Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm so honored to have been on. This was such a good conversation.
Thank you. I do feel that way too. And it's going to be transcribed. T definitely put that bug up my ass. And so like, I have a team of people working on it, because when we talk about accessibility, I had not considered that. So I'm really looking forward to sending you all the details from the upload, and I appreciate you. And thank you. Thank you for all this wisdom you've imparted upon us, and this beauty and all the things. And I appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you too. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you have a good night, and that you still sit with yourself, because I saw you look so calm.
Yeah.
Y'all have a good night.
You too.
All right, peace, y'all.